Good morning and welcome to another episode of NAMIC Atlanta's Coffee Talk. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Philip Nutsugah, who is the Senior Vice President of Product Development and Management at Cox Communications. How are you this morning?
Doing well, Taylor. Thanks for the invitation, and it's good to be here with you too. I know we've been
It is
planning this for a while, so
Yes, we have. It is a
glad
pleasure speaking with you. We are going to talk about a few things, just about your career journey and your advice to the newer generation, that being millennials and Generation Z. So without further ado, if we'd like to get started, the first question I would say is, what have you learned as a tenured executive at Cox Communications, and how would that be a reflection of your career journey?
Sure. One thing I've learned is that I'm now the guy being asked the question, "What have I learned as a tenured executive?" So that's always interesting to be the one on this side of the advice column, if you will. Some things it goes without saying, of course, some things have changed dramatically, but some things are the same. The things that have changed dramatically are the technology. The fundamentals of the technology is the same, right? The technology stack that undergirds all of our communication services we offer is the same from the physical layer to all the applications we enjoy today. Because the specifics have changed, right? There is a lot more fiber in the network today because there's newer applications that require a lot more capacity in the network. So from that standpoint, the industry has changed dramatically. What some of the things that have remained the same though are as a person, as a leader, as an individual, what creates success, satisfaction, results are the same, right? You walk into the doors every day and your mind is on how you're going to satisfy your customers, external customers, the paying customers, your internal customers, your colleagues, your bosses, your team. Those things are the same. Now, as the years have passed, I've been on different sides of that, of that divide, and how I personally, engage with customers, colleagues, teammates, bosses, and so forth, have all evolved. But it's that I think is what's the most exciting about being on this side and looking back, thinking the technology in the industry is fascinating. The way we deliver it is fascinating. It's a great time to be in technology. It was 30 years ago. It's still an awesome time to be a part of this industry, but people are people, and
Yes.
The industry is made up of people, right? And you've got to engage with people. Doesn't matter.
That doesn't change,
all through
right?
history, right? We've all, to be a successful person, and I don't mean that by title or career level. I mean just to be a successful human being.
Right.
The way you do that has not changed. And
so you live by certain principles that have helped you throughout this entire journey thus far.
Absolutely. Just from a professional standpoint, there's several things that have always been really important to me, right? Number one, how I lead, and this is something, these are 4 principles that I've sort of put together over the years, just from my own mentors and people who have been around. How I lead, how I influence, how I perform, my results, and then what I deliver, right? And those things have not changed. Learning leadership lessons when you're early in your career, and when you're toward the end of your career, after several decades in the industry, they're a little bit different. How you engage lead, but you still have to lead, right? How you influence as an early career employee and a later career employee are different, but you still have to influence. How you deliver results look a little bit different, but you still have to deliver results. And so, those are the principles I live by as
Mhm.
as a professional person. In my personal life, my family is important to me. I'm married. I've got 3 kids, 3 grown children, and the way that we've engaged over the years, the biggest challenge has been so-called work-life balance. That life is always out of balance, quite
Yes.
frankly. So I've always thought more in terms of work-life integration. Right, there are
Okay.
times where I'm fully engaged at work, and there are times where I'm fully engaged at home. But at all times, I'm fully engaged, family person, dad, husband, and friend, and so forth. And there are other times when I'm a fully engaged corporate executive, right? And and ensuring that in each of those spheres, I can still wake up and feel good about
Right.
what it's not. I don't always do it perfectly,
Yes, of course.
but those are some of the principles I live by. And then thirdly, um, giving back to the community,
Okay.
giving back to through I'm involved in several nonprofits, through mentoring, through just engaged in different ways. I've been very blessed, quite frankly, over the years, and it's an opportunity to be a blessing and to be to others.
Oh, that's wonderful. You spoke about mentorship just now, so I guess my next question would be, do you believe that the latest generation of the working class is able to cut time in half? I know historically for Generation X and baby boomers, when they give you advice on just work ethic, they're like, stay at the same company for your entirety of your career, don't move around, try to move up the ladder. But it seems like these particular generations, me being a millennial and also Generation Z, they're cutting corners. So, they might do an internship and that might lead them to the company they interned with. But then, they'll skip around 3 or 4 times in different roles at different companies before really getting into their concrete role. So, do you give them advice when you're mentoring on maybe having a bit of balance there and not, doing the norm?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's well. Let me start differently. Um, the fundamental question is, what do you want out of your career? What do you want out of life? Right. And, what personally, sort of gets you charged up, right? What are you passionate about? And the intersection of those 3 things is really where the magic happens. Now, sometimes that happens in one company,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes that happens in multiple companies. But, with that in mind, what I would say is don't bounce from company to company just because
Right.
you're bored, right? I mean, sometimes that if you're in a role that is not meaningful and the company is not sort of meeting its end of the bargain, then sure, But what I've noticed is sometimes folks will just sort of jump from place to place simply
Hmm.
because they're bored, right?
Right.
And not thinking about where those 3 things intersect, right? Whether you're doing meaningful work, whether this is what you're doing is aligned with your own career journey, and then also the people you work with, sort of that community
Right.
and adding to that balance. Um, Large companies, I think you're right. I mean, the older Xers and Boomers tended to stay with one company. I've been with 2 companies in my career. Well,
Hmm.
maybe 3 because one got merged with another. Um, but I've also known many Boomers and Xers who've gone from company to company and have grown their careers. Right, large
Okay.
companies. in a company that's like Cox, $20+ billion, or others that are 50, 60, 100 billion, so forth, by definition means they're national, they're global. There's plenty of roles and plenty of jobs and plenty of things to do in those companies that are very different from one to the other. That sometimes look like what would happen if you move from company to company. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But the other is also true that if you can grow your career by changing companies until you sort of find your niche, that's fine, right? The key though is you have to really understand, where you're headed and what that means. I'll throw this in. There's a book I read a number of years ago that makes a real good point about minorities in particular, and how sometimes we get frustrated by being stuck on these career plateaus.
Yes.
And instead of having the right strategies and with career management, end up sort of moving from company to company. And if you're not careful, end up not really fulfilling your own career goals.
Right.
So, beginning with the end in mind, right, and then working through that is what's key. Whether you stay in one company or you stay in 15 companies. Right?
Very, very true.
Have a vision as to what you're trying to accomplish.
No, and that's completely true. I think that sometimes millennials and Generation Z, that particular demographic, is just looking to network a lot. And so, they get very excited very easily. Exposure is very important to both of these generations. Social media has a lot to do with that, of course. Using LinkedIn as a platform to kind of get your name out there. There's not a lot of organic interactions where, you go to a conference or some sort of meeting where you're meeting people in real life. Of course, the climate that we're in, that being COVID, things are extremely different than they were maybe 10 years ago. So this is kind of a different question, I guess. How has the climate of COVID changed your career and how you think about things and decision making?
Yeah, COVID forced all of us, right, regardless of generation, forced all of us to confront the question: can we engage with each other in a virtual environment and do it successfully, right? Can you hire somebody 100% without ever having met them and shaken their hands and seen anything about their body language other than, the neck up, right? How do you keep, an organization engaged and so forth? How do you trust people that they're doing what they say they're doing, and because you don't see them in the hallway to ask questions,
right?
And it forced all of us to confront those very fundamental questions about what's a successful corporate culture looks like. I personally prefer to be in the office. That may be a generational thing. I like being in the office. I like being around my team. I like being the energy that came from that. And so, to be honest, the first few months were a big adjustment for me, and having to lead that way. But I had to learn quickly because I have lots of people who depend on me for leadership, for setting that vision, for giving them hope, for ensuring that they have all the tools and the wherewithal to get their jobs done, to be communicated to keep them informed and so forth. So, regardless of what my own bent might have been, I had to get around the corner fast, right?
Yeah,
and get over that learning curve very quickly, and keep my team and myself, energized and engaged and moving forward. So, one thing I would say is social media is a great thing, right? There's ways in which it keeps people engaged, but I would also say it's not a substitute for human real human
No, yeah,
3D.
that's a great point.
And I would say, the advice I would give to millennials and Gen Zers is don't 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 think social media is the same, right? Don't view the virtual environment as, because a lot of people graduate in the virtual environment and
Yeah.
have worked well in the virtual environment. But they're not substitutes, right? And out of sight, out of mind, unseen and forgotten. I mean, all of those things are true because we're all human, right?
No, exactly.
And so, come to the office when you can, right? You don't have to be 100% of the time, but come into the office, go to the cafeteria, make relationships, let people know who you are, what you do,
Right.
put a name and a face together. Are you tall, short? Are you how engaging are you, right? I mean, all of those things, I think, just make the whole person. And it's important that the people who have influence and decision making about your career, it's important that they get to know you, right? That they know who you are. And that's hard to do in a virtual environment.
Yeah.
If you're
No,
sitting in a
yeah.
conference room, somebody sees your face and knows you. If you're on a
Right.
Teams call and your camera isn't on, and you don't
Yes.
speak, nobody
Yeah.
knows who you are.
Right.
Right. So so that'd be my advice to them. Don't mistake the two. They all work in different ways, but they're not mutually exclusive.
I could agree with that as well. I actually started with Cox during the peak of the pandemic. And so I learned, to acclimate virtually completely 100%. I did utilize LinkedIn to kind of network with people, but I also had to kind of throw myself in the wrenches and see how could I engage with my team, how could I do team building, what tactics would I use to stay energized and do things like that, have those organic conversations, bounce ideas off of other people. So there was a little bit of self-sufficiency there,
Sure.
but there was also aid where I would be talking to different people, just learning the culture, sometimes even the verbiage. I mean, when you join a culture and you acclimate to a new company, the vernacular is different, the way things
Indeed.
are done are different. And so doing that during COVID was a little bit challenging because I wasn't seeing people in real life. So I would say there was a pro to social media in that aspect. However, it's not something that I've heavily depended on. I would consider myself a grand millennial. So that term has kind of been thrown around as not particularly aligning with everything that has to do with my generation, but a little bit above that. So a Generation Xer or a boomer. I do believe that talking to people, getting to know someone, learning about their experience, how they do things, really sets yourself aside as just someone who is a leader.
Yes.
Tapping into servant leadership, knowing yourself, creating an identity for yourself. All of that has to be done in real time. So,
Indeed.
I definitely,
Absolutely.
I think we're saying the same thing, just from a different perspective.
I'm really glad to hear that, Taylor. One thing that I've thought about often is, yes, there are generational differences, right, that happen, but fundamentally, people are people.
Yes.
Right. One of the classic book is Dale Carnegie's, how to, I'm drawing a blank on the title right now, right? But how to make friends and influence people, right? By Dale Carnegie, written decades ago. But if you read that book, the language is a little bit dated, but the stories and the guidance and advice, how to win friends and influence people. Sorry, but the guidance are the same because human beings for millennia have all been about the same thing. About how do I grow myself? How do I take care of my family and my friends? And how do I make my community a better place? At the end of the day, that's what all human beings need. Millennials, Gen Zers, the way they do all that and the way they gain all that is a little bit different. So the key is to know what matters now, right?
Mhm.
Um, and don't lose yourself and your values in the middle of all of that, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, right? And
Agreed.
so whether you're like yourself, a millennial that looks more like an Xer, or
Yes.
you're an old soul that feels one way, or a boomer that still wears board shorts,
Right.
around. I mean, it's do you, be authentic, know what matters, and then live by your values and be authentic.
Of course. Of course. So just to wrap up, my last question is, do you feel humble as being a senior vice president of a company in the realm that you're in? Did you foresee this future for yourself? Was it a goal set?
Um, yes, I often feel very humbled by the role I'm in and the opportunities that I've been given over the years. At the beginning of my career, I had a goal. I had a goal to, be a leader in
Hmm.
in the organization. Did I foresee this exact job, senior vice president of product development and management at Cox in 2022? No, but I did have an ambition
Hmm.
to be in the kind of place that I am today.
Right.
So I think, and then over the years, I've had opportunities and, mentors and some luck, being the right place at the right time,
Yeah.
and so forth, that have gotten me where I've gotten to. So yes, but it's a very humbling experience. I think everybody would tell you who gets to this position is sometimes you think back and you think, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't expect to be here, but
Right.
I'm very, 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 very grateful to be here.
Yeah, I
So
think that it's important not to, reflect on your journey and say, like I would have done this differently and that differently. I
yeah,
think everything happens for a reason. I do believe in that
yeah,
philosophy. Of
yeah,
course, me being only almost 30, I'm only scratching the surface in my career, but I definitely want to do things with intent, but also
indeed,
not overthink everything because I think things
yeah,
will fall into place.
yeah, yeah, they will, and have that vision. Um, and then, I've known people who have mapped out their careers very specifically,
Mhm.
and want to do this job and do the next job and do the other, which works very well. You know, for me, it's about the experiences and the knowledge that I've gained along the way and attempting to reach, where I wanted to reach. So, you're right. And the big advice I'd give to people is where you begin is not necessarily where your career is going to end. Right? If you talk to
Right.
most senior executives, they'll tell you that their first job is not necessarily what they're doing today. Right? The real key difference is the experiences and the learning and knowledge and the relationships and the mentoring and the that you gained along the way. That's really what makes the difference. So surround yourself with mentors. I heard the advice that sponsors will find you.
Mhm.
Build relationships for those sponsors to find you. Um, have a reputation as a person who's always trusted to deliver on their objectives, large
Right.
or small. Raise your hand and to take on new opportunities.
Yes.
I think those are, I think, the ingredients of building a successful career. And because none of that is given, right? That's where the humility comes in. When you get to the place, you think, okay, I mean, I did all the right things, but none of that's a given. You can do
Yeah,
all of
yeah, of
those
course.
things. You still have to have. There's always that invisible hand, right? Whatever you believe that invisible hand to be, but there is always that hand that's always also out there, playing a role in getting where you want to get to. Right?
Right. Well, Thank you so much for, shedding your light today. And, of course, our viewers will be happy to listen to this session and hopefully learn a lot of different things. So, on behalf of NAMIC Atlanta, we just want to thank you, Philip, and we hope to keep partnering with you on different things.
Thank you very much. You guys are doing a fantastic job, and all the best to all the leadership team. Thanks for having me
Thank
today.
you. Have a
Okay,
good
bye-bye.
one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.